Mercedes-AMG Interview Lounge.
All right, please welcome to the show, Katie Couric. There she is.
Hi. How are you?
This is Danielle.
Nice to see you.
How's it going? Everyone?
Are you disappointed in the interview so far?
I couldn't hear what you guys were saying about
Okay, I'll tell you what we were saying.
You were in a soundproof booth.
Okay, Katie. I get nervous interviewing people that I really, truly admire. They say you should never meet your idols.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think you'd call me your idol, Elvis, but I'm happy to be here, and you can't be nervous because I'm so normal and super easy to talk to, don't you think, Elvis?
Yeah.
And I'm listening to my voice in my headset, and I'm sounding very low and raspy.
You are.
Hi.
You're turning everyone on. Okay, I want to talk about how you worked your ass off for this show. And that's a quote, by the way. Katie Couric used the A word.
Okay.
I did.
That's okay.
But this show is so important. It's so important to know that there are a billion different things you could be watching.
Right.
We found something that you really need to watch. It'll open your mind. It'll teach you something. You actually learned a lot doing this show.
Oh, my God. This was like writing 6 theses on 6 different topics. Honestly, I had to take these huge issues and unravel them, unpack them, figure out how could I make them engaging and visual, and who would I talk to, and how do you position it? And they're all sort of controversial. And my goal was to really give people, I always say that today, everyone has an opinion without portfolio. You know, they have a point of view, but it's not based on really much of anything except for what their friends are saying or what maybe they heard or something they saw. And in some of these issues, there are a lot of nuances and complexities, and people need to sort of see the big picture in some cases, not in all cases. Some
Right.
people have justifiable opinions on a lot of issues. Believe me, I know that. But on some of these bigger issues, like the ones I tackled, I feel like it's really important to have context and perspective, so then you can have an informed opinion,
Well, I'm
which
glad
seems
you
to be
did this.
rarer and rarer these days.
People need to do more of this because I tell you, in this day and age we live in, no one wants to hear any opinion except for their own. They
Yeah.
want to be right all the time without knowing the facts.
And a
it's-
friend of mine said,
it's
you know,
exhausting.
in terms of how we get our news and information, everyone gets affirmation instead of information because they're listening to outlets that reflect back at them their own points of view. They're never challenged by different points of view. And I think the whole impetus to have a measured, reasonable conversation is antithetical to the news environment today.
Well, in a moment, I'm going to go down the list of the topics on
Yeah.
each show, and you'll see what we're talking about.
Now, the topics that we're going to go over, did you pick them out of a bunch of topics, or were these specifically something that like you were really interested in at first?
Yes. No,
Yeah.
I picked them because I just thought, you know, a lot of these subjects are getting short shrift. I felt like they deserved a deeper examination. And I was personally fascinated by all of them. And I was confused by some of them. And I wanted to have a deeper understanding myself. So the approach I took, Danielle, is I was like, come take a journey with me. Let's learn about this together. So then we can continue to talk about it.
All right.
You know what? Let's take a step back. There was a documentary you did about gender in America. And is that really what got you interested in this format of traveling across the country and meeting people?
I did
'Cause
this.
That's a difficult job.
I did this documentary for National Geographic called Gender Revolution because there was such a change in how gender identity was being understood. And for me, as somebody who is 61 and grew up in this sort of blue-pink paradigm, this idea that people could be gender nonconforming and non-binary and fluid. My daughter, who's graduating from college next month, told me her first class, she goes to Stanford, everyone introduced themselves and then gave their preferred pronouns. Now it's just pronouns because preferred suggests it's a choice.
Right.
And I said, wow, things have really changed since I was in college. And I had also interviewed Carmen Carrera on my talk show and had made a really stupid comment or asked a really dumb question. It was pre-taped. I said to my producers, keep it in because it's important to have a teachable moment. I asked her a question about her anatomy, which was really offensive to the trans community. And now, of course, I understand why.
But you learned.
I learned, and I also wanted people to learn that if someone like me, who's, I think, a pretty open-minded, fair person makes that mistake, that people could understand why that's a mistake and how they shouldn't make it. But I ended up getting a lot of backlash from the trans community. But instead of kind of cowering, I decided to face my mistake head on and say, clearly, I have a lot to learn about this.
Right.
So I'm going to do it. And hopefully in the process of my education, I can educate other people as well. So that's how Gender Revolution came about. And National Geographic was very pleased with that documentary. And they said, why don't you do some more? And I remember Dr. Oz, who I don't often quote, said when I was on his show talking about my gender documentary, he said, you know, what I realized is it's hard to hate up close. You know, once you personalize a situation, once you get to know people and kind of get in their shoes and in their skin, the hate sort of dissipates and you can be much more accepting and understanding of a lot of people's travails. So,
well, this is why people need to watch more programming like this. Learn rather than sitting there and yelling at people. I mean, I'm telling you, we live in this world, and I see it every day here, Katie. I can say almost anything and watch my text messages roll through like that. And there's so many people who are so easily offended at things they think they heard or things they just don't understand. It's mind-boggling.
And even when you try to like go a straight line, like, you know, you don't go to the left to the right. People always assume that, oh, you said this, so this means you're this. Or you said this, so this means you're this. And they don't know. They haven't really listened.
Everyone is on the attack these days and lashing out.
Yeah.
No, they're not.
and gosh, I think what was so wonderful for me about this series is I got to listen and I got to think and I got to sort of consider what's going on in different points of view. Everything is so sort of supercharged right now.
Right.
I think the climate, and I think you can understand why in some cases because it's insane what's going on in the country. On the other hand, I think I was saying to Elvis that I think Donald Trump is a manifestation of a lot of anxiety and fear and apprehension about all these seismic shifts we're seeing in society. We're undergoing these monumental changes, and it's creating a lot of fear and a lot of insecurity. And that's one of the things that I really wanted to kind of unpack.
When you hear the list, listen to episode lists, the list of episodes. The Muslim next door, what's it like being Muslim in America?
50% of Americans say they've never met a Muslim. Hate crimes and Islamophobia are up.
Yeah.
And, you know, I wanted to really also understand how we had this narrative about Islam and Muslims worldwide and in this country that is so unfair and unjustified. But it's a lot of how we've been conditioned in popular culture. And I thought that really was so important. It really deserved further exploration. I went down to Raleigh, North Carolina. I talked to two families where their children, you know, really wonderful college kids. Two were in dental school. One was in college. Just murdered, shot at point blank range. The two sisters through their hijab. The young dental student shot multiple times in the chest because the neighbor next door thought they were taking a parking space. And, you know, I think that the news cycle is so crazy and so fast and furious. These things happen, and then we're on to the next thing.
Yeah, we move on. We don't stop and learn, like, what was that?
And these families have never really spoken about it. But that was a really, you know, really an important hour I think, for people to watch. Of course, you know, some people are not open-minded, but for those who are and are hungry for more information, I think those people, that this series is for them.
Okay, let's move on to the next one. I'm dying to see your brain on tech.
Oh.
Now,
have you seen Black Mirror?
Oh, yeah.
That scares the you-know-what out of me because I feel like that's the direction we're going with so many things.
I know, it's scary.
It
Well, you
really
know, I
is.
just wanted to see how technology was robbing us of our humanity. The fact that we check our smartphones 150 times a day.
Well, hold on. To be fair, when I walked in to say hi, you and your team were all on your phone.
I know. Listen, I admit it. Actually, Elvis, in the hour I say I'm Katie and I'm addicted to my phone. And we kind of replicated an AA meeting, and we pulled back, and we had a big circle. Everyone goes, "Hi, Katie." And so, oh no, I have an issue. Believe me, I'm not being holier than thou about this at all.
As fascinating as this interview is, my phone's right here. I keep, oh God, I wonder if someone's
well,
trying to get in touch with me.
that's one of the things. That's one of the things the scientists say.
What?
That even having the phone within your line of vision, that it actually is incredibly distracting.
Oh, totally.
And it creates anxiety and distraction. And it takes 23 minutes to think about something deeply. So these constant interruptions when we're going back and forth from our phone to whatever task we're doing, you cannot multitask. That is a complete misnomer. Multitasking is not something you can do.
Well, I just moved my phone. I want you to know. But I'm wondering right now, I wonder how my phone's doing.
Well, no, you should take it and you should put it out of sight, because I had my brain wired and checked for distraction and for anxiety producing, because my phone started going and my brain waves started going crazy. Right. And I did it with Steve Aoki, because I'm sort of friendly with Steve.
We love him.
I know, kind of a funny little odd couple.
Did you get caked? Did he cake you?
No, hasn't caked me yet. But I love Steve, and he is such a tech addict. And of course, his whole profession relies on tech. But I think he Instagrams like 1 million times a day on these stories. And so he and I went and got our brains tested. He's also very interested in brain science.
Right.
Things that you don't know about Steve Aoki. So we went to this lab out in California and had our brains tested.
And you have one. We all have brains. Let me take you back in time.
Uh-oh.
This is NBC Today Show. A conversation with you and Bryant Gumbel about the internet.
God.
Have you heard this?
You think? About 1,000 times.
This is our favorite.
This is our favorite. What is internet? 1994. Here, it may be a little loud, so make
I
sure
like it with the Russian accent.
Listen, here we go.
Back now at 56 past, I wasn't prepared to translate that as I was doing that little tease.
Oh, that's
that little mark with the A and then the ring around it.
At.
See, that's what I said. Mm-hmm. Katie said she thought it was about.
Yeah. Oh.
But I'd never heard it. I'd never heard it said. I'd always seen the mark, but never heard it said. And then it sounded stupid when I said it. Violence at NBC.
I heard be around big fight up in the lunchroom the other week.
There it is. Violence at NBC. GE.com. I mean,
well, Allison should know.
What is internet anyway?
Internet is that massive computer network, the one that's becoming really big now.
What do you mean? That's big. How does one? What is
getting mad?
Like mail?
No, a lot of people use it and communicate. I guess they can communicate with NBC writers and producers. Allison, can you explain what internet is?
No, she can't say anything in 10 seconds or less.
Oh, Allison will be in the studio shortly. What does it mean?
It's a giant computer network made up of started from.
Oh, I thought you were going to tell us what this was.
It's like a computer billboard.
It's not an. It's a computer billboard, but it's nationwide, and it's several universities and everything all joined together.
Right.
And others can access it.
Right.
And it's getting
crazy.
bigger.
Who was Allison, by the way?
Allison was the writer for the Today Show.
But did you hear how Bryant Gumbel was
Allison
getting?
Davis.
He was getting all worked up. Yeah. What is internet?
Well, isn't that insane, though? Think about it. That was 1994.
He was probably thinking it's not going to last anyway.
I mean, isn't that funny? God, it's just amazing.
Well, that's anything. For instance, the other day we were talking about some technical thing at my house, and we were going, "Wow, that's really cool." And I reminded my partner Alex, in 1 year we're going to look back on this conversation and go, "Gosh, remember when that was new? Now it's nothing."
I know you think have Alexa, not Alexis. Alexa coming up with everything, and I talk to this little disc in my bedroom all the time. And then I think she can hear everything.
No,
right?
she's listening
totally.
And you have to say Alexa off, right?
Yep.
If you don't want her to know,
but she's still
like
there.
what you're telling your husband or talking smack about somebody.
I swear, sometimes she will start talking to me, and I'm just like, I didn't ask you anything. What are you doing? Like, it scares me.
But I mean, it really does feel like we're living in the Jetsons.
Yeah.
Right?
There's robots now. I was in Kohl's the other day, and there's a robot that is at the door, and you can ask it questions, and it can whatever. Then there was another store where there was a little robot just moving around with everyone, and I'm like, what is going on? This
Well,
is
I went to a
crazy.
sex doll factory for this episode in San Diego.
How was that?
No. Hi. I thought you all would enjoy that. And first of all, there are these life-size dolls.
And they're
I think
realistic?
they have detachable genitalia because I asked if they were dishwasher safe. And And now they have AI in these robots, in these dolls. So you can actually have a conversation. And I interviewed this gentleman who owns 4.
Was he good? Was he a good kisser?
You'll have to ask Harmony, his new robot. Oh, okay. I mean, it's so crazy, isn't it?
Yes.
But 1 in 4 guys say they would be willing to have sex with a robot in the next 50 years.
I mean, 1 in 4 guys in this room probably have.
You can design your own doll, I think.
Yes, you can design it. Everything from how much hair you want them to have, their eyebrows, their eyes, their hair, their hair color, their breast size. It is really, really weird. And they had this whole table full of nipples. And I was like, those look like yarmulkes. What the hell is going on here? They're all different colors.
No, wait,
they're all different shades.
Which episode is this?
This is episode 3, and it's called Your Brain on Tech. It is bizarro. Bizarre. But they have artists. I mean, they're really works of art. They cost like $20,000.
Oh, yeah, they're expensive.
And this guy, I was like,
cheaper than a boyfriend.
I was like, don't you miss having conversations with real people and being able to interact? And he's like, no, not at all. I was all right.
I get it. No, I can see there's a need for that. By the way, Katie Couric is here. Her new show, not only on National Geographic, but it's America Inside Out. It's everywhere.
It's on Hulu, YouTube, Facebook. Everywhere.
And there are so many things you could be watching, but
on demand.
You should be watching something that's going to open your mind. It's going to teach you about a table full of nipples. I mean, okay, but let's move on. There are some other serious things you guys tackle on this.
Yeah.
The Revolt.
Yes, that was on gender inequality in Hollywood, Silicon Valley, and beyond. And ironically, I came up with this in the summer, which predated the Me Too, Time's Up movement, everything about sexual harassment, sexual misconduct in the workplace. And what I really wanted to understand is, why are women so stuck? Why are the numbers so bad? I mean, when you look at them in terms of CEOs or people in the corner office or the number of directors in Hollywood, the number of women on boards, the numbers are pathetic. And I wanted to know, what the hell is going on? It's 2018. Women have been in the workplace for a long time. There are more women in law school and I think medical school now than men. Yeah. So I wanted to really kind of unravel that. And that's what I did. I went to the set of The Handmaid's Tale in Toronto. I interviewed Viola Davis because of intersectionality. There's even more challenges for women of color in terms of, as she said, Katie, we just want to get paid what white women are getting paid, because if you look at the statistics, they're much worse for women of color. So why is it stuck in the mud?
It does seem to be spinning and not moving.
I think, there are a lot of reasons, but one of the things that I looked at was cultural conditioning and implicit bias. From the time we're out of the womb, we're assaulted by these images and messages, which I think make us view gender and race in very specific ways. And I think that Kara Swisher, who I love, who I interviewed about Silicon Valley, talked about the mirrortocracy, MIRROR. People hire people who look like themselves. And I think that, that it's just been able to go on, and there haven't been things that have been put in place that changes the equation. In symphony orchestras now, they're blind auditions. So you can't tell the gender of the person who's auditioning. Oh. And it's really increased the number of women in orchestras all across the country. Wow. So blind resumes are one solution. The Rooney Rule, which was named after Dan Rooney, the coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm a sports idiot. Owner, sorry for misspeaking about that. But anyway, he put a rule in place. They wanted more diversity in the coaching and management ranks of the NFL, that if there's an opening, at least one minority candidate must be interviewed. So that opens up the possibilities immediately. So I think there are a lot of things that can be done that make, in terms of negotiating salaries and having a flat salary for every job. So that was really interesting too.
Wow. You would think, especially after this year, how intense these stories have been, change is underway.
Right.
You would think.
I think that it is, but, I think change is hard. That's one of the overarching things I learned from doing this series. We all get set in our ways. We all have a particular point of view. Changing our minds and considering different things and making that kind of mental shift is challenging. Furthermore, macrocosmic change is hard. We're, witnessing a huge change in demographics. By 2044, this country will be majority-minority population. And let's be honest, for white people who have been sort of had more advantages than everyone else for so long, who've been sort of the norm, for them to kind of adjust to this, for some people, it's really hard.
It's causing problems. Yeah. And this is another thing you learned, working hard, meeting all these people across the country. There is outrage, actual outrage. Some people are just so mad because they feel like they're getting cheated. They're getting screwed. But the answers aren't there. They can't figure out what it is.
Well, yeah, one of the episodes is on white anxiety. And I think people are feeling, I think a lot of it actually has its roots in economic insecurity. Economically, we've gone from a manufacturing to a technological society. All these industrial towns in the Rust Belt and in the Midwest, they're shrinking. Young people aren't staying in these small cities and towns. They're leaving for big urban centers, which is great for cities, although that brings another host of problems with overcrowding and stuff like that. But, some of these towns are dying, and they're seeing their way of life that existed during their grandparents, great-grandparents, and great-great-grandparents' era just kind of disintegrate. And so it's causing a lot of anxiety. And also, I think that so many people just feel disrespected. There's a lot of what Joan Williams, who wrote a great book called White Working Class, calls cultural condescension and cultural cluelessness. And people just want to be respected for what they do. And there are a lot of very hardworking, blue-collar folks out there who are actually making the country go. And somehow, because of their education level or their quote-unquote lack of sophistication, they are not respected. And I think that kind of resentment is so powerful. And that, I think, foments this anger. And I think that's what we're seeing. And as I said, I think Trump is a manifestation of that because for whatever, they believe he hears us, he cares about us, and he listens to us.
Right.
Yeah.
So out of all your travels, out of all the people you spoke with, putting this incredible series together, what's the headline that maybe surprised you the most? What did you learn? And you actually looked yourself in the mirror and go, Katie, you learned this today. This is kind of cool.
I learned so much. Yeah. I can't even tell you, for example, the whole Confederate statue debate. I didn't realize that most of these statues were erected at the height of the Jim Crow South or the Jim Crow era, not immediately after the Civil War, as a real affront to African Americans who were starting to make progress. Or a lot of these schools were named following Brown v. Board of Education, integrating public schools as a sign to say, no, we're not going with the federal government. We're not integrating our schools. If you hear about that in that context, it does make you wonder, do these individuals, do these quote-unquote iconic figures have a place in public spaces, which very much announce to the community, these are our values? So I learned that. I learned, that Storm Lake, Iowa has embraced an immigrant population. And because of that, it's thriving as a community. So, I learned everything. I did one episode on the Age of Outrage. And it's about cultural appropriation, safe spaces, trigger warnings, microaggressions, this whole new language about how we look at the world and kind of interact with people. And, at first I was like, oh, safe spaces, that's ridiculous. And now I understand why safe spaces are a positive thing for some people who are members of a marginalized community who may need that kind of space to figure out where they stand. These are 18-year-olds, and to formulate their positions and their outlooks. And so I think everything is so nuanced. I just am not doctrinaire about anything anymore because I try to understand, okay, yes. And when you think about the extremes, and I think the media now, plays on extremes. They want people to be outraged or to get all fired up because if they are fired up, they'll read it, they'll share it, and they'll kind of stew in it. But things are much more complicated than than they seem, and they're much less black and white. There's so many gray areas.
And that's so important to remember that.
Did that happen a lot, though, where you went in with one mindset and came out and were like, oh my gosh, I've been totally wrong about this the whole time?
Well, I guess maybe about some of the political correctness stuff, like microaggressions or trigger warnings. And, trigger warnings have been, I think, blown out of proportion. Yes, there are examples where they seem a little bit beyond the pale, like, oh, this has a scene in it. If it re-traumatizes you, you can leave. But in a way, it's actually just common courtesy to say, as a student at Northwestern said, an African-American student said, my professor said today we're discussing blackface. I wanted to give you a heads up because if you feel uncomfortable, I just wanted you to know that. And to me, that's like just being considerate of a student who may be in the minority in the classroom, may feel awkward or uncomfortable. And so, of course, anything can be taken too far. But if you understand it, then you're less kind of extreme in your own reaction to it, if that makes sense.
Are you having fun?
Yeah, I mean, I'm learning so much. I feel like...
Look at all you've done, Katie. Katie Couric, by the way. When in the world of journalism and broadcast entertainment as well, you've been doing this, it seems like, successfully for a very long time.
I've been doing this for, God, it's so crazy.
So look what you're doing now versus, let's say, co-hosting the Today Show.
It's funny because sometimes I sort of miss that day-to-day, that daily connection I had with an audience, which now I get from my Instagram account because I feel actually close to people through Instagram. And I sort of miss kind of being in the middle of the news cycle, like, although I think it must be very psychically depleting too, to kind of it must feel like Groundhog Day because every day there's a new scandal or controversy. But to be able to really dig deep into something and explore it, I feel like I'm doing a bit of a public service.
Oh, absolutely.
And that I don't know, I just hate to see the country so divided. I hate so much hatred and vitriol in the ether. And one of the things I realized is, I don't know, maybe I'm a Pollyanna and sort of, too positive, but I feel like people are basically decent. They just need an outlet to express their decency. And right now, I think it's encouraged to just be horrible. Horrible to each other, disrespectful.
Well, absolutely. It seems like there's actual payoff for being awful.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. But
I mean, listen, I think these are very weird times. And I think when you have someone who is the leader of the country behaving in a certain way that is so mean and nasty and, just base and coarse, no wonder people have felt like they can unleash all those things in themselves. And it's perfectly acceptable, especially if you're hiding behind the cloak of anonymity of social media.
Wow. So are you going to watch?
Of course. I'm so intrigued now.
I know, that's the thing.
Well, I think you guys will. I hope you watch, and I hope your listeners watch. And really the goal is to use them as a springboard for further conversation. Like, people can still have a point of view, but maybe they'll can I just finish with one thing? Because I know I'm just talking so much, you guys, but I've been sucking on this iced coffee and apparently the caffeine is kicking in.
She's high on life.
I had this very profound experience talking to some EMS workers in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. And I just threw out a couple of things because I knew what they were going to say. It was pretty predictable. I said, they're all white guys. And I said, what do you think of Colin Kaepernick? And of course, they were highly critical, terrible, disrespectful. And I know some people feel that way. And then I said, what do you think about Black Lives Matter? And they predictably said all lives matter. And then an African-American EMS worker named Carlos walked in. And he sat down and we were sort of laughing about the timing, like right on cue. And Carlos went on to say, as an African-American man in this country, when I was a little boy, I saw people getting lynched for looking at someone like you, Katie. And, all the things that are happening now are really kind of a continuation of, and you have to wonder if that kind of hatred still exists. Anyway, I can't quite paraphrase exactly what he said, but he was just very calm, sort of talked about his point of view and why these movements mattered and how much further we have to go in terms of racial equality. So all the guys were listening to him, And one next to him said, just listening to you for 5 minutes makes me change my point of view. And the other gentleman said, Carlos, we've never talked about these things because we've never wanted to make you feel uncomfortable. And I said, wow, look, if more people sat around eating cold pizza, kind of talking this way, instead of being in their own echo chambers, think how much progress we'd be making in terms of understanding each other. And that's sort of what I want this series to do. I want it to just open people's eyes to different points of view and to be able to say, gosh, I thought about this one way, and now I'm sort of reconsidering my point of view. So
it's great to be able to say, you know what, I used to feel A, now I feel B.
Or Elvis, I never thought of it that way, right?
Right.
That's the highest compliment people have paid me. They said, I watched the series and, I never thought of it that way.
Right. They don't even have to make up their minds about anything.
Right.
Just understanding there's another point of view, another perspective. And so congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you guys for having me on to talk about it because, you put work, I've worked, as Elvis said, I did work my ass off for 8 months. I traveled all around this country, which also was great because you don't see that on television. You don't see some of these people represented in any way, shape, or form on television now. And so you put it out in the world and you just hope that people are responding to it and people are learning from it. What else can you do?
Congratulations.
Yeah.
How fun. I mean, and plus there's a table filled with nipples.
That's right.
Oh my God.
Can't go wrong
I'm
there,
really sorry I brought that up. Hey, by the way,
He's got something for everyone.
That's not all the tables had on them, Elvis. I'm going to leave the rest to your imagination.
I'm sure it was quite a buffet. Katie Couric, National Geographic, of course, is one place to see America Inside Out. I believe Wednesday.
Well, no, they've all aired. So now you can see them on demand.
Okay.
And you can see them on YouTube, Facebook, and Hulu. Hulu's a really easy place to look at these episodes.
Okay.
So you can binge watch them if you want.
Absolutely.
And tell people, I'd love to hear what people think. If they want to tell me or if they have an opinion or if there's a question they have, they can tweet me. And, I'm on Instagram all the time, pretty much 24/7. I do have a sickness. Elvis is bad, very bad.
I know you're addicted. And, you've got the fever.
And Facebook, of course. So, that's the whole hashtag for the series is keep talking. So hopefully people will do just that.
What is internet?
Allison. Where is Allison when you need her?
It's a circle with an A with a circle around it.
About, around.
And again, I apologize for stepping on your daughter.
Oh, right. That's okay. Elvis stepped on my daughter. I don't even remember that, but all is forgiven.
She's okay. We're
and
good.
She's graduating from college, and she seems no worse for the wear.
See? Katie Couric, absolutely fascinating. Thank you for coming.
Thank you guys so much.
Katie Couric.